What do you do when you're an award-winning screenwriter, but the screenwriting work starts to dry up? Simple. You take the leap to become an indie author. And my guest on my channel, Mr. Patrick Cirillo, you'll know him from his movie credits, has moved into that genre, and he has written some amazing books, including my book of the month for June of 2026. So please welcome to the channel, Mr. Patrick Cirillo. Thank you, Pat. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Well, so let's dive right in with the story. You're a successful screenwriter. You have an award-winning movie. You took 13 attempts to get a screen sold back in the day.
Mhm. Yeah.
And tell us briefly about that story.
Well, I started out as a wannabe screenwriter. I was going to graduate school at UCLA in their film program. And if you want to be a screenwriter, you don't even have to be a high school graduate, frankly. You have to produce really good screenplays that somebody wants to buy. And I wrote about 13, or actually I did write 13 before I sold one. So I sort of mortgaged my 20s and went headlong to get into the film business. And I was fortunate in that that 13th screenplay was Homer and Eddie. It sold,
Okay.
it got made. It put
Yep.
me into the sort of into the big leagues of screenwriters.
Okay. And then your most famous movie, Tears of the Sun.
Yes.
That everyone knows this movie, award-winning movie. So after that, what happens? The industry's changed a lot. We all know this.
Yeah, I mean, after that, I had, sort of a wonderful run. I was getting all kinds of jobs, and it was a really wonderful, busy period, and sold a number of screenplays. But just got kind of, you know, most of them didn't get made, or all of them didn't get made,
Mm,
for that matter. And it's a common story in Hollywood. It's very hard to get movies made.
yeah.
I got to the point where the business changed around 2008. We came out of a Writers Guild strike
Hmm.
that I was involved in, and when we came back from that strike, the studios had basically decided that they going to spend the kind of money on writing development that they used to spend. And that sort of was me, because I
Yeah.
was creating stories. I wasn't the guy who was, doing all the superhero movies over and over again, though I had nothing against them. I would have done them, but I was creating original stories, and that was how I made my living. And that kind of dried up. And I'd always worked on spec. And managed to sell enough to keep myself, my head above water and doing well, and my name on all the writing lists. And so I kept writing on spec, thinking one of those scripts will sell. And what happened was they all went into the independent film world, which
Right.
means you have to get a producer, you have to get a director, you have to get a star, you have to get the movie made before you get paid, or if you do get paid, it's an option fee, and not a lot. And I had projects with Ethan Hawke attached. I had projects with other directors attached, and none of them were going. And at one
Hmm.
point, I had 5 projects that either had producers attached, directors attached, sometimes both. Some had money behind them, and
Yeah.
but nothing was getting made. And I started to write another screenplay, which was called Wyatt and the Duke. I had this wonderful idea for the screenplay, and I got about 20 pages into it,
Hmm.
and I said, I'm just not going to put another iron in that fire, and hope that something happens that hasn't been happening. So I said, let me try and write it as a book. And I did that. I started with my screenplay outline and started writing it as a book. I got to the end of it, and it was, just a dreadful book.
Oh,
I made a study of where the difference was, and that was when I learned, the difference really between a screenplay and a book, in a way that allowed me to write a good book. And once I started, adding those elements to it, the interior life, the expanded prose, flashbacks, and backstory, etc., all the things that you can do in a book that you really can't do on the screen. Because when you're writing for the screen, all it is what you see on the screen, what you hear on the screen, and nothing else. Right? It's a very tight discipline, and
yeah.
once I figured it out, what a book takes, it became eye-opening and liberating in a very profound way. And the book ended up becoming good. I spent time developing the villains and thinking about who they were as individuals. In the movie, they were just a family of thugs.
Right.
In the book, they've got chapters to see how they developed, what they came from, and how the father turned his children into monsters,
Right.
uh, and it was fascinating. None of that is in the screenplay because there just wasn't time for it. I was
Hmm.
able to really do backstory and figure out who the characters were, and I was able to take that forward through all my other novels, and they're all richer for it.
Fantastic. Well, let's talk about your runtime series. So the first book, the series that I've fallen in love with already with book one. So it's called the runtime series. Is there a reason behind the name?
Well, runtime is that you can read them in about the time it takes to go to the theater and come back.
Right.
Sometimes in the time it takes, Dead by Midnight, I think you can probably read in the time it takes to watch the movie.
Right.
And
Okay.
that's the intent here, that they would have a very movie-like feel. They'd be very sort of bold and aggressive, and you could get through them in an evening if you're a fast reader intent on doing it. And that was my plan, that to give you a movie experience that you can stay home and read a movie.
And that's exactly what Hyde was for me. And I did. I read it in one sitting because I could not. I could not
Yeah.
leave it alone. I had to know what was going on.
Yeah,
So
you don't leave a movie and come back and watch it later, and
that's
that's what I
right.
wanted to do with the runtime series. That you watch them or read them in a night, if you
Yeah.
can. Obviously, you
Well,
don't
I
have to,
did.
but yeah.
I timed it 1 hour and 52 minutes it took me to read it. So
Oh,
there
so
you
you're
go.
fast reading. Yeah, that's
Fast
great.
reading, yeah. And
Yeah.
so I mean it's very brave also to take like such a well-known classic story and
Mhm.
modernize it and change it and make it your own. It's still got the elements of the original, but I love what you did with it. And I'm not saying too much more because I don't want any spoilers because I want everyone to have the same organic experience that I had with this book. But it was fantastic. And
Thank you.
I I told you this story off camera, and I'd be happy to mention it now. I have a book of the month every month, and during the month of June, at the very early on, I read a book and I thought, okay, this will be my book of the month. This is a great book. On the 28th of June, I picked up Hyde. I got to a scene with a puppy. I'm sure you know the scene I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And at that moment, I went, right, this is my book of the month. This trumps every other book that I've read this month. And so it became my new book of the month. And it's just that good. So people, if you haven't
Thank
read
you.
it yet, go out and get Hyde. You'll be introduced to Pat and his series. And like me, you'll be hooked and you won't be able to let go. So Brown Bomber is book number 2.
Mhm.
It's based on a true story, a true person.
It's based on the life of Joe Louis, who
Yeah.
was heavyweight champion of the world for 11 years running, possibly the greatest heavyweight of all time, the greatest
Yep.
fighter of all time. And what people don't know is that he did so much more than what we're aware of. He was a hero to the black community, of course, but he was also a war hero. Not that he fought in the war, but he was a soldier, and he did so much to help the American army in recruiting and keeping peace in a time when there was segregation within the army and stuff. He was a real major hero. He also had an affair with Sonia Henney, which
Wow.
is an
Okay.
important part of the book. And Sonia Henney was a darling in Hitler's in the 1930s because they were
Yeah.
buying her movies and playing them, and she knew Hitler and she knew Joseph Goebbels and stuff, and so we worked that into the story as well. And so it's got a lot of historical fiction, but then we exaggerate it. And I wrote it with a dear friend of mine, Joe Gayton. And we exaggerated the story. We looked at, okay, what is a superhero?
Yeah.
And we sort of decided that, okay, Joe Louis does things 4 times as well as anybody. He can hold his breath 4 times longer than the world record. He can run 4 times faster than the fastest guy going.
Right.
And,
Right.
and that was sort of how we sort of evaluated what a superhero was. And so he becomes involved with the OSS, and Wild Bill Donovan at the time when the OSS was getting started, and he starts fighting the war prior to the actual war breaking out. So it takes place in 1938 when the war is sort of going on secretly between Germany and the United States. And nobody is aware of it except for Joe Louis and the guys of the OSS, and of course the Nazis who are trying to figure out a way to beat us, before the real war is declared. And it's a lot of fun. It's a big story. It's a lot of fun. I think of it as a superhero tentpole movie, and
Yeah.
we actually had Ice Cube as attached as our producer, and Tim Story, who directed Fantastic Four, was involved in it as well, and it looked like it might have a chance to become a big movie, and didn't. But it's back to me now, and now it's back to me and Joe actually,
Yeah.
and now it's out there, and anybody can read the movie that was almost made.
Fantastic. Well, it may get optioned again. There's
Yeah, that's
streaming
the hope,
platforms out there looking for books and looking for stories. So who knows? It could.
Yeah.
So the
Oh,
runtime
fantastic.
series is far from over. The most recent one, Dead by Midnight. Now this
Mhm.
sounds right up my alley. 3 hours to live.
Yeah, Dead by Midnight is a real-time thriller. So the story takes place in literally about the time it would take you to watch the movie or
Yep.
read the book. So everywhere the lead character goes, we are there with him. There's never a moment when we jump forward to something. It all happens in real time. You could imagine it as a movie, all done in one shot if a director was so inclined. And that is the that is the sort of the pretense of this thing. That it happens in the time it takes you to read it, and that there's always something going on. So when he gets in an elevator and goes down, 15 flights, which in most movies is cut.
Yep.
Here you're with him for 15 floors of an elevator, and I've got to make
Correct.
those things happen.
Wow, that sounds awesome. So number 4 in the book coming out shortly, Saint Charlie.
Yeah, St. Charlie was a screenplay that was near and dear to me. I was going to direct it. I
Okay,
wrote it
great.
way back in the 1990s.
Wow.
I had just sold a few screenplays and had a couple movies made, and I was sort of riding high at that time. And I thought, I've got to create a low budget movie that's got some gumption and direct it myself because I wanted to elevate myself into the director's chair.
Nice.
And we came close with it, never quite had it happen. Then a few years later, Mark Rydell, who directed on Golden Pond
Yeah,
and
yeah.
a number of other great movies, uh, wanted to do it, and he wanted to do it with Mel Gibson. And so I stepped aside as a director so he could do it, and that didn't come to pass. But then years later, another really good director, Brian Goodman, who's become a
Mm,
friend, took hold of it and wanted to do it, and got Ethan Hawke attached for a while. And it looked like it was going to get made there as a low budget independent movie, or modestly budget independent movie. Nothing with Ethan Hawke is super low budget, because he's a
hmm.
pretty big star.
Yeah,
And that just didn't come to pass either. I think Ethan took another movie, and by the time he was ready to come back, other projects or whatever had gotten in the way, and so that didn't happen. But again, I love that story, and I knew I was going to do it as a novel. I
great.
wasn't sure if I was going to expand it into a full-length novel, but then when I had the idea for runtime, I said this would be a really good runtime. It's the most literary so far of these stories. It's very personal. It's very emotional,
Wow,
uh,
good.
and it's a love story within a crime drama, and pretty good
Fantastic.
story. And
So
that'll probably be out in a couple of 3 weeks.
I'm looking forward to it. I'll be reading and reviewing that one in time as well. So
Oh,
this is the
fantastic.
true Hollywood story, isn't it? Like all these movies that could have been that never were. And
Yeah,
so it's great now that you've got the options back so that you can
yeah.
now release these as your own books. But you've got a story about a big project that it's with Sony Pictures, but it's may never see the light of day.
Yeah, it's called City of Darkness. Again, I wrote it with Joe Gayton,
Hmm.
a dear friend I wrote The Brown Bomber with. And in 1990, we wrote a spec script called City of Darkness, which was about two little boys, 9 years old, who the grandfather was a comic book artist back in the 1930s, who created these characters that the kids loved. And they found a way to do an incantation and to bring the villain of the comic book into the real world.
Wow.
And once he was in the real world, they discovered pretty quickly that they couldn't control him.
Hmm.
He was doing horrific things, and they figured that we better get the comic book hero out into the real world too. And this was done before. This was back in 1990, so that project, that idea has been stolen a bunch from us.
Yeah.
We had it. Ours was one of the first, or probably the first. We sold it to Columbia Studios or Sony at that time, and John Peters directing, or John Peters running the studio,
Yeah.
and it just launched us into Joe and I into the top of the screenwriting world. We were meeting with Michael Douglas, who was our producer regularly,
Wow.
and Danny DeVito was brought in to direct it, and we were meeting with him all the time. So it was pretty heady stuff. And it was a great story, and I'd love to do that one as a runtime, but that one was sold, and Sony
Hmm.
owns. I don't own it anymore, but we were paid for it. And I have a number of other stories that were like that I've sold that I just don't have the rights to anymore. There was another one that Joe and I did. We had a fantastic track record
Sounds
together.
like it. Yeah.
We did The Englander, which would be another great runtime story, but that was sold to MGM, and we don't own it.
Shame, but you never know. Maybe you can get them back sometime. You never know.
It's
But that would be
possible,
good.
yeah.
So you write horror, you write thrillers, you write crime noir, you write a little bit of romance, you write a bit of comedy, and just in case that's not enough genres, you've also got a book about AI called Laura.
Yes.
Now, this is very relevant. Tell us about this book.
Well, Laura is the first book I ever wrote that was a book. It was never in my head as a
Right.
screenplay. I didn't
Okay.
have anything preceding it, no screenplay that I was stealing from myself. This was a novel, and I had it in mind for a novel from the very beginning. So in that way, it's only a novel. I haven't
Okay.
even thought about writing a screenplay yet. And I wanted to say something about parentage, and how we as parents create the next generation in our own image. You always see this stuff about people saying the next generation coming up, they got their head in their ass, they're going or they're miserable people. Well, I hate hearing that because we make them.
Right.
We
It's
make
our
them in our
fault.
own image.
Yes. Yes.
And so that became my theme, and I decided that I would find a character who was true and honest and decent. And what would happen if he owned one of these robots who arrives to him tabula rasa? She's beautiful, but there's nothing there other than her understanding of the English language, and everything she becomes is something that he teaches her or that she picks up from the day that she arrives, to the end. I said,
Mhm.
well, and what if you put one of those into the hands of somebody who was really decent? And
Yeah.
um, and that's the story of it. Kenton Bean is this very shy professor, uh, who just wants connection, who is just, has never been successful with women, but wants to be in love and wants that kind of connection. Can't get it with human beings. He was married once, but never had a connection, even with his wife. And so he spends his entire inheritance on Laura. And he brings her into this world, and it becomes quite a ride. It's a lot of fun. It gives us a hopeful look at what AI might be in the future.
Yeah.
The reviews have been spectacular. I mean, people really love it. I've had a number of people say it's among the best books they've ever read. It's
Fantastic.
been my biggest seller,
Mhm.
and it still sells every day. And so I've been really fortunate with that one that it has struck a nerve. Hopefully, it strikes a bigger nerve, because a lot of people yet who have never heard of it, and that's the one time that I think, boy, I wish I'd really fought to get it traditionally published, because I
Yeah.
think one might have really benefited from the mechanics of the traditional machine. They could have done a lot more for it than I can do individually, going on shows like this and
Mhm.
reaching out to people in small batches, and it's been successful that way. It's doing well and selling. But I don't know. I just think that that book should be read by millions, and
Well,
I'm just so proud of it. And
I'm going to read it and review it and introduce it to my little corner of the world as soon as I can as well, because
well,
AI
thank you.
is so current, so relevant, and also right up my alley. You've got a few other books that you've also written. Do you want to mention any of those?
Uh, sure. I've got Extraordinary Souls is a very unusual book. It's about witches in Los Angeles, and it
Right.
takes a realistic look at witches, and it's really more of a domestic drama.
Okay.
A family of extraordinary people who have extraordinary powers, and with those extraordinary powers come extraordinary problems. They have such ambition, and it's. I find it funny, but I think it'd probably be, but in a very dark way.
Nice.
And basically, it's if you remember the old TV series Bewitched.
Of course.
It's like
Yes.
that, but a much darker look at
Nice.
at that world, that there are witches living among us. They are trying to take over, but they are small in number. But this time they're getting organized, and they're trying it in a different way. And the only thing that can stop them really is their own dysfunction. And it's about a family of that is totally dysfunctional, yet immensely powerful.
Wow.
And
Scary.
there's a second book that I have done. I'm
Okay.
just ready to get more of the runtime out before I release it. And that one's called Rage, and it's about and it's a duology. So once that one comes out, the series will be over. But
Wow.
it's a look at witchcraft through the lens of a dysfunctional family.
Fantastic. So, well, there you have it, everybody. There's a whole range of books that you get to read from Pat. In my opinion, start with Hyde, get stuck into the runtime series. If you're even remotely interested in AI, get hold of Laura. I'll be reading that
Mhm.
one very soon and reviewing that one. And then, Pat, you're releasing runtime series one a month or one every couple of
I'm trying
months
to do
coming up.
one a month. I have them staged, so most of the work has been done in advance. And so really all I have to do to get the new one out is to really fix the scene description a little bit and and figure out how to go through the process of publishing, et cetera. Because I thought that I really want a slate, and the vision for a runtime is that I'm a movie studio. Here's my slate of movies. If you don't like this one, you might like this one, and you might like that one. You don't have to read them all. You can pick any one of them up and start anywhere.
Right.
You can read the one that appeals to you. So I'm like Paramount or Warner Brothers, and I'm presenting a slate of pictures. I will have six fairly soon by the end
Hmm.
of the summer, and then I'll just keep it going for as for as long as I can.
Great.
And I've even entertained the thought of getting some other screenwriters involved to get them to contribute
Fun.
to it. So that
Yeah.
becomes a really big slate of books for people to read. So trying to make it sort of a popular destination for people who want to read a book in a night.
Fantastic. And that's what you can do with these. So yes, great. Well, as they come out, I'll be reviewing them and making sure that the audience learns about them. Thank you so much, Mr. Pat Cirillo, for coming to the channel. It's an absolute pleasure to meet you. I've loved chatting with you, and let's do it again sometime.
Love to. Be happy to come on.
Awesome. Thank you very much.